want to talk about preaching, and this is from a letter Srila Prabhupada wrote to Badrinarayan Prabhu, who's now Maharaj, in 1975, about how to preach. And it's very relevant, and Prabhupada's balancing what appears to be two opposing ideas. You have to deal tactfully in your preaching. Do not compromise the truth. That's one side. We don't want to compromise. But speak palatably. So he does not reject it, but accepts it. That is preaching. Beautiful quote, right? So let's talk about that. Sometimes you'll hear some devotees are saying, you can't compromise, and they'll listen to some preaching and they'll say, oh, this devotee's compromising. And the other devotees will say, but what's the use if you preach and everybody goes away? And they're both true. And Prabhupada is acknowledging both of these. And Prabhupada was always very balanced in his preaching. So he didn't generally present one side in a way that it didn't include the other side. Because, the world's not black and white. Things are 360. So it's great to be a brahmachari, and it's also fine and wonderful to be married. It doesn't mean that if you're married, being brahmachari is bad. It might be bad for you. If you're brahmachari, being married is bad. It might be bad for you, not for everybody. So that's the way Prabhupada preached, to encompass everybody. So when he makes one point, it encompasses a certain mentality or a certain nature or a certain activity. And it may encompass a certain devotee who does it that way. But he generally, if not always, would present the whole circle so that we wouldn't be fanatical. So I love this quote. Yes, we cannot compromise, because if we compromise, then what are we giving people? Something watered down, some medicine watered down that doesn't work? So what's the point? But if they don't take the medicine, if we don't make it sweet, then also, what's the point? The medicine is so bitter, no one's going to take it. So you say, but I gave the medicine. Okay, you gave the medicine, but you didn't give the medicine because nobody swallowed it. So you have to know how to give the medicine, make it look beautiful, taste good, so they will swallow it. So Prabhupada's saying, make it palatable. So that's the art of preaching. Now, in terms of compromise, I don't have this exact quote, but from one of my godbrothers said that he heard Srila Prabhupada said, preaching means what to say and what not to say. So sometimes we may not say something. It doesn't mean we're not compromising. It just means we know that person is not ready to hear it. And if they hear it, they may misunderstand it. It may disrupt their Krishna consciousness. So we don't want to do anything to disrupt someone. And then you might say, but Prabhupada said we didn't go to the moon. Yes, that's disrupting. But that's not something you want to present to a new person the first day at the temple or Sunday feast. I often joke, okay, great Sunday feast lecture, we didn't go to the moon. Another great Sunday feast lecture, talk about all the problems with women, all the frailties of women. Of course, this is not what we talk about. Does it mean that Prabhupada didn't say we didn't go to the moon? Does it mean that Prabhupada didn't say certain things about women? No, it's just not appropriate in that environment. So Prabhupada's saying, preaching doesn't always mean you have to say everything to everyone. But preaching means say what is relevant, say it in a way that they can accept it. Now, another aspect of preaching is that in order for people to advance in Krishna consciousness, they need association. That means we want them to associate regularly, come to our temples, come to our programs, come to Bhakti Vriksha programs, Namhata programs, Rath Yatras, whatever, come to India. We want them to keep associating because it's by that association they become devotees. So sometimes we think, well, I have to give them the whole philosophy in 1 hour, and they can't digest it all. We give them too much. And they may not want to come back for one of two reasons. They may not want to come back because they feel like, well, I got the whole philosophy, now I know what it is. So they've answered all my questions, and I'm on my way to go to another place to find out more. Or it just may be too much for them, and they don't want to go back because they feel that they just bombarded. So, my experience, I would like to share with you that we should always be conscious when we're sharing Krishna consciousness that we want to inspire people to participate in some way, to come back, to associate with devotees. And I'll tell you one story. It's a very funny story. It's about my godbrother, Gunnar Maharaj, and we're going to be celebrating, I think, on Friday, which, of course, you don't... I'm not making this video on the date it's being shown, but in 2 days we're going to celebrate his disappearance. I'm making this video September 4th, but this is probably going to be shown around September 20th or so, more or less. So there was a person coming to the temple, and the person was a painter, a house painter. So Maharaj said, "We have a room that needs painting. Could you come and paint it?" And the boy said yes. And the boy would stay very late. But Maharaj would make sure he would stay late because he didn't want him to go home. So Maharaj would say, "Well, it's so late, you might as well stay at the temple." So he would always get him to work and say, "Well, we need this painting done by this day, so you're going to have to stay till like 8 o'clock. And then it's like, go home now. Why not just stay here? And so it took him about a week to finish the painting, and he never left. Now, here's the funny part. We didn't need the room painted that he painted. But Maharaj knew if this person just stays with the devotees for 1 week, he'll become a devotee. And therefore, he asked him to paint this room to give him service and to get him to come every day to the temple. And he asked him to paint late so he would stay overnight. So, engaging people, giving them service, encouraging them to do things that they like, explaining the philosophy in a way that resonates with them, that excites them, that inspires them. That's what preaching is. At the same time, we don't compromise, we don't water down, we're not amorphous and ambiguous in our preaching, and we don't just preach because it feels good. And a lot of so-called gurus preach things that actually don't mean anything, but it feels good. It's all one, and it's all love, and it's in you, and it's outside of you, and we can feel the oneness in all of us, and I am you, and you are me. That doesn't really mean anything. They're trying to say something, there's a spiritual energy, and we're all God. This is really what they're trying to say. But a lot of times they say it in such ambiguous terms, but the way they say it, and what they say, it just makes people feel good. So, we're not going to say things just to make people feel good. We're not going to definitely compromise and say something that's not true, or say or hold back on what someone really needs to hear. But at the same time, we're going to say it in a way that they can swallow it, digest it, and say, "Yes, that tasted good. I like this." That's the art of preaching. And ultimately, you judge your preaching by its success. And I'll leave you with this one thought. This one devotee, after I was giving a class or giving a workshop, he was asking me how it went. I said, "Yeah, I did the presentations well." And he said, "No, that's not how to analyze it. You have to not analyze it from your perspective that you presented well, but you have to analyze it from perspective of the students. Did they get it? Did they learn? Because you may have presented it perfectly, but they didn't get it. They didn't learn. So if they didn't get it and they didn't learn, it's your fault, even though you so-called perfectly presented. Obviously, you didn't perfectly present because they didn't get it. So we can't just think, well, because I quoted Shastra and I quoted Prabhupada and everything is perfect, then people should just get it. No, your goal as a preacher is to make sure they got it. And just because you perfectly represented it doesn't mean they got it, doesn't mean that that was perfect for them, doesn't mean they understood, doesn't mean it relates to them. So these are all important points to consider. Hare Krishna.